I was 22 when Martin called me on a Tuesday afternoon and asked, "Hey, you busy this weekend?" I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the spreadsheet I had already stopped pretending to care about. "That depends," I said. "Are you asking because you need help moving another couch?" He laughed. "No. My parents are flying to Italy for 2 weeks. My mom refuses to leave me alone in the house because she still thinks I'll accidentally burn it down. She has a point. I've only started one small kitchen fire. One that I know about." "Exactly. So, want to stay with me for a while?" It sounded casual. Too casual. Martin and I had been friends for almost 3 years, ever since we met during our first semester at university. We had graduated a few months earlier, but somehow nothing had changed. We still grabbed coffee 3 times a week, argued about movies, complained about work, and sent each other terrible memes at 2 in the morning. He was the kind of person who somehow became everyone's favorite without trying. Friendly without being loud. Confident without showing off. The kind of guy who remembered your birthday, your favorite snack, and the name of your childhood dog after hearing it only once. Sometimes I hated how easy it was for him to make people feel important. Mostly because I knew exactly how impossible it was not to fall for someone like that. The problem was, Martin was my best friend. And he had absolutely no idea I had been in love with him for over a year. I had become an expert at hiding it. When he talked about attractive women, I smiled. When coworkers asked if we were brothers because we spent so much time together, I laughed. When people joked that we acted like an old married couple, I rolled my eyes right along with him. It was easier that way. Safer. Because losing him would hurt far more than pretending my feelings didn't exist. "So?" he asked again. "You still there?" "Yeah. You'll come?" I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. "Sure." "Perfect. I'll even make sure you don't burn the kitchen down. See? That's why I keep you around." His words were meant as a joke. They still settled somewhere uncomfortably deep inside my chest. A few days later, I pulled into the driveway of his parents' house with an overnight bag that was probably much larger than necessary. Martin opened the front door before I even reached it. "There you are." He grabbed one of my bags before I could protest. "I can carry that." "I know. So why are you?" "Because you're a guest. I'm your friend." "Exactly." He smiled like it explained everything. Somehow, with Martin, it usually did. His parents lived in a quiet neighborhood about 30 minutes outside the city. Their house wasn't enormous, but it felt warm in a way my apartment never had. Family photos covered the hallway walls. A worn wooden clock ticked softly above the stairs. The entire place smelled faintly of fresh coffee and lavender. "My mom left enough food to survive a nuclear apocalypse," Martin said as he opened the refrigerator. I stared. Every shelf was full. Containers with handwritten labels. Fresh vegetables. Prepared meals. Desserts wrapped carefully in foil. "Is she expecting us to feed the neighborhood?" "That's just how she is." He shrugged. "If she thinks someone might get hungry, she cooks." I laughed. "I suddenly understand why you never learned how to cook." "Exactly." He pointed proudly at the fridge. "I was raised with unrealistic expectations." The first evening passed exactly the way every evening with Martin usually did. We ordered pizza despite the refrigerator looking like a grocery store. We watched a terrible action movie. We argued about whether the ending made any sense. Around midnight, we ended up sitting on the back porch with cold drinks, listening to crickets while warm summer air drifted through the trees. "This place gets really quiet at night," I said. "I know. You don't mind?" Martin looked across the backyard. "I used to." "What changed?" He thought for a second. "I guess you stop noticing silence once you get comfortable with yourself." That sounded unusually thoughtful. "You've been thinking." "I do that occasionally." "I thought it was against your personal brand." He laughed again. "You know." He rested his elbows on his knees. "I'm actually glad you're here. I told you. Someone has to prevent kitchen disasters. No. His voice softened. I mean it. He looked toward me. The house feels different when there's another person around. For a second, neither of us spoke. The porch light cast soft shadows across his face. His expression wasn't sad. Just honest. I get that, I admitted. I hate empty apartments. I knew you'd understand. Of course I did. I'd spent countless evenings sitting alone in my apartment wishing someone would simply exist in the next room. Not talking. Not entertaining me. Just there. Martin stretched before standing. We should probably sleep. Responsible decision. I know. It feels weird. Inside the house, he showed me the guest room. My parents changed the sheets yesterday. They're more organized than I am. They're more organized than everyone. He leaned against the doorframe. If you need anything, my room's right across the hall. I think I'll survive. Good. He started walking away before stopping. Oh. What? My mom left strict instructions. That sounds dangerous. You have to eat breakfast. I usually eat breakfast. No. He pointed a finger at me. You actually have to eat breakfast. I feel threatened. You should. Then he disappeared into his room. I smiled to myself as I unpacked my bag. Everything about the evening had felt normal. Comfortable. Easy. Exactly like every other day we'd spent together. Which should have been reassuring. Instead, lying awake in the unfamiliar guest bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about one simple fact. For the next 2 weeks, the person I was secretly in love with would be sleeping just a few steps away. And somehow, I already knew keeping my feelings hidden was about to become much harder than it had ever been before. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I heard cabinet doors opening downstairs, someone humming off-key, and I remembered. Martin. I checked my phone. 8:14 a.m. Not exactly early, but much earlier than either of us usually woke up on weekends. When I walked into the kitchen, Martin was standing in front of the stove wearing gray sweatpants and an old college t-shirt. He looked up immediately. There he is. I thought you didn't cook. I don't. So, I'm reheating pancakes. That's not cooking. Exactly. He grinned proudly. My mom made them yesterday. I laughed. I was worried for a second. You should be worried if you ever smell smoke. He placed a plate in front of me. Sit. You've become very bossy since your parents left. I've always been bossy. True. Breakfast was surprisingly quiet. Not awkward. Comfortable. The kind of silence that only existed between people who had known each other long enough to understand they didn't have to fill every second with conversation. Eventually Martin broke it. So? What do you want to do today? I assumed we were spending the entire weekend eating everything your mom prepared. That's definitely happening. But I was thinking we could clean out the garage. I stared at him. The garage? Yeah. You're 23 years old. I know. And you voluntarily want to clean a garage. It's embarrassing when you say it out loud. It should be. He laughed into his coffee. My dad has been asking me for months. So you waited until he left. I waited until I had free labor. There it is. I knew you'd figure it out. I pointed my fork at him. I've been manipulated. You've been invited. There's a difference. Not really. An hour later we were standing inside a garage that looked like 30 years of family history had exploded across every shelf. Old bicycles. Boxes labeled Christmas. Camping equipment. Tools. Paint cans. Board games. Photo albums. I take back everything I said, I muttered. This is going to take forever. Martin picked up a dusty cardboard box. Probably. He sneezed. Definitely. For the next couple of hours we sorted everything into piles. Keep. Donate. Throw away. Every 5 minutes Martin found something that triggered another story. Oh, I remember this. He held up an old baseball glove. My dad tried convincing me I was going to become a professional player. Were you any good? I was terrible. So why did he keep trying? He believed in me longer than reality did. I smiled. That's actually kind. He still has unrealistic confidence in me. I've noticed. A little later I found a stack of old photo albums. Can I? Martin looked over. Sure. Most of the photos showed family vacations, birthdays, school events. Then I found one that made me laugh. Martin couldn't have been older than 8. He was missing one front tooth. His hair was sticking in every direction. He was holding a fish almost half his size with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Oh no. He immediately recognized the picture. Don't. This is incredible. It is not. You looked like a tiny pirate. I looked distinguished. You looked like you lost a fight with a hairdryer. He tried reaching for the photo. I held it farther away. This one's staying. I'm burning that album. You wouldn't. My dignity depends on it. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. He eventually gave up trying to steal the picture back. I can't believe you're enjoying this. I absolutely am. You are the worst. I've been telling you that for years. He shook his head with a smile that made it impossible to tell whether he was actually annoyed. Probably not. Around lunchtime we collapsed onto the garage floor, surrounded by half-finished piles. I forgot cleaning was exhausting, Martin said. That's because you never clean. I helped. You moved 3 boxes. They were emotionally difficult boxes. I rolled my eyes. You deserve an award. I know. He leaned back against the wall. The sunlight coming through the open garage door caught tiny particles of dust floating through the air. For a while either of us spoke. Then Martin looked toward me. You know. What? I'm glad we stayed friends after graduation. I blinked. Why wouldn't we? I don't know. He shrugged. Sometimes people drift. He wasn't wrong. I'd already lost touch with several people we used to see almost every day. Life happened. Jobs happened. People got busy. I don't think we'd ever completely lose contact. You don't? No. He studied me for a moment. You sound very sure. I am. Because I couldn't imagine a version of my life where Martin wasn't somewhere inside it. Even if only as a friend. Especially if only as a friend. He smiled quietly. Good. Something about the way he said it stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. By early evening we had actually finished the garage. Martin stood in the driveway with his hands on his hips, looking unusually satisfied. My dad is going to think burglars organized everything. I expect full payment. You already got pancakes. Not enough. I'll buy dinner. Now we're talking. Instead of ordering food, we drove into town and found a small burger place neither of us had tried before. It wasn't busy. Just a handful of people scattered around the restaurant. Halfway through dinner, Martin's phone buzzed. He smiled after reading the screen. My mom. Checking if the house is still standing? Exactly. He answered with a quick picture of our food and another one of the organized garage. A few seconds later another message appeared. He laughed. What? She says she's more impressed that I convinced you to help. Your mother knows you very well. Too well. He looked back at the phone before suddenly turning it toward me. Smile. What? Before I could react, he took a selfie with both of us squeezed into the frame. There. You didn't ask. If I ask, you make weird faces. I still might. You look normal. I doubt that. He examined the picture. Nope. Then, without thinking twice, he sent it. A completely ordinary photo. 2 friends having dinner. Nothing unusual. Nothing romantic. No reason for anyone to think anything else. Still, as I watched him smiling at that picture, I caught myself wondering how many photos I already had of him. Hundreds, probably. Group pictures. Vacation pictures. Random snapshots from coffee shops or road trips. He was all over my camera roll. I wasn't sure he realized how much of my life he quietly occupied. Or maybe he did. When we got back to the house that night, Martin stretched and yawned. I'm exhausted. You supervised most of the work. Managing people is difficult. You managed exactly one person. You were a difficult employee. I deserve overtime. He laughed. I'll pay you tomorrow. As he headed upstairs, he stopped halfway and looked back at me. Thanks for coming. You've thanked me like 5 times already. I know. He smiled. I'm probably going to keep doing it. For some reason, hearing those simple words made something inside my chest ache. Because I wasn't staying there for free food. Or because his parents had asked. Or because the house was too quiet. I was staying because every extra day beside Martin felt like borrowed time. Time I knew couldn't last forever. And the more ordinary those moments became, the more terrified I was that one day I'd have to learn how to live without them. By the 4th day, we had settled into a routine. Martin woke up first. I woke up because I could hear him making coffee. We ate breakfast together, argued over what to do that day, spent hours doing something neither of us had planned, and ended every evening sitting somewhere talking until neither of us realized how late it had become. It was strangely domestic. Comfortable enough that I occasionally forgot I was just a guest. Monday morning was different. Both of us had to work. Since our offices were only 15 minutes apart, we decided to drive together. Martin tossed me the car keys. You drive. Your car? I trust you. That's a terrible decision. I've seen you drive. Exactly. I've also seen everyone else. I appreciate the confidence. Rush hour traffic moved painfully slowly. Martin had connected his phone to the speakers, and some old playlists from university started playing. Halfway through the second song, I laughed. No. What? You still have this playlist? It's a masterpiece. It contains at least 3 songs you claimed you hated. I changed as a person. No. You bullied me into liking them. I introduced you to culture. You introduced me to terrible pop music. I introduced you to happiness. He leaned back in the passenger seat, looking entirely too pleased with himself. I hate admitting you're right. I know. You enjoy it too much. I absolutely do. By the time I dropped him off outside his office building, we were still arguing about music. He opened the passenger door before pausing. You'll pick me up later? Unless I decide to abandon you. Please don't. I'll think about it. He laughed. I'll buy coffee. Accepted. Then he disappeared inside the building. For a few seconds I watched people walking through the entrance. Martin blended into the crowd almost immediately. It struck me how strange that felt. To everyone else, he was just another guy heading into work. To me, he had somehow become the person I measured my days around. That realization stayed with me through the entire morning. Work was unusually busy, which helped distract me until lunch. Then my phone buzzed. Martin. Lunch break. You alive? Barely. You. Pretending to work. Same. A second message appeared. My coworkers think I'm productive. Don't ruin this illusion. I smiled before typing back. You're texting me during work. Exactly. Productivity. By the time I finished reading his messages, I was already smiling like an idiot. One of my coworkers noticed. Good news? I locked my phone. Just my friend. She nodded. Must be a good friend. Yeah. He makes you smile a lot. I looked at the screen one more time before putting it away. He does. She smiled knowingly before returning to her lunch. She probably assumed Martin was my boyfriend. It wasn't the first time someone had made that mistake. Usually it embarrassed me. This time. For just a second. I let myself imagine what it would feel like if it were actually true. The thought disappeared almost as quickly as it came. There wasn't much point dreaming about something impossible. After work, I arrived outside Martin's office a few minutes early. Employees streamed out through the front entrance. Then I spotted him. He was laughing about something one of his coworkers had said. He waved the moment he noticed my car. "There you are. You bribed me with coffee. I remember." The first thing he handed me after getting inside wasn't coffee. It was a chocolate bar. "What's this?" They had a vending machine. "And? You always buy this one." I stared at it. "I never told you that." "You didn't have to." He shrugged casually. "I've seen you buy it like 20 times. It shouldn't have affected me. It was just a chocolate bar. A tiny observation. Something anyone could have noticed. Except, most people didn't notice things like that. Martin always did. He remembered my coffee order. The names of my cousins. The fact that I hated tomatoes unless they were cooked. Which side of the movie theater I preferred sitting on. The first book I'd ever recommended to him. Sometimes I wondered if he realized how carefully he paid attention to people. Or maybe that was simply who he was. "You're thinking again," he said. You've had the same expression for 30 seconds. I was just surprised. About chocolate? About you remembering things." He looked genuinely confused. "You're my best friend." He said it so naturally. Like there was no other explanation necessary. Of course he remembered. Why wouldn't he? My chest tightened. I looked back toward the road before he could notice anything on my face. That evening we stopped at a grocery store. Martin insisted we needed fresh fruit despite his parents' refrigerator still being full. "I think we're shopping because you're bored." "I'm shopping because adults buy groceries." "You bought chocolate." "I'm a balanced adult." As we walked through one of the aisles, someone called his name. "Martin?" He turned. A woman about our age approached with a shopping basket. Blonde hair. Friendly smile. Professional clothes. She looked familiar. "Oh, hey, Claire. I almost didn't recognize you." They hugged briefly. "You work around here now?" "Yeah." She smiled. "I moved back a couple months ago." They started catching up. Jobs. Apartments. Mutual friends from university. I stood quietly beside the cart, pretending to compare cereal boxes while giving them space. Eventually Martin looked toward me. "Oh." He smiled. "Claire, this is Louis. My best friend." The words were simple. Completely innocent. Still, something about hearing them out loud warmed my chest. My best friend. Not just my friend. Not someone I know. My best friend. Claire smiled warmly. "It's nice to finally meet you." I blinked. "Finally?" Martin looked slightly embarrassed. "I've mentioned you before." "You have?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Sometimes." Claire laughed. "Sometimes?" She looked at me. "I feel like I already know you." Martin groaned. "Claire." "What?" "You talk about him constantly." "I do not." "You absolutely do." She counted on her fingers. "Louis said this. Louis recommended that movie. Louis thinks I'd like that restaurant. Louis would laugh at this." She smiled at me again. "So nice to finally meet the famous Louis." Martin looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. "Can we continue shopping now?" Claire laughed. "I'll let you two escape. It was nice meeting you." "You too." After she walked away, Martin pushed the shopping cart with exaggerated focus. "I don't talk about you constantly." I raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't going to say anything." "Good. But apparently your coworkers already know me. They know your name. That's still interesting." He sighed dramatically. "I spend a lot of time with you. I noticed. So naturally I mention you." I nodded slowly. "Naturally." He glanced sideways. "Don't make it weird." "I'm not making anything weird." "You're smiling." "I can't help that." He bumped my shoulder lightly as we continued walking. You really are the worst. Maybe. But the truth was, for the rest of the evening, I couldn't stop thinking about one sentence. You talk about him constantly. I knew it didn't mean anything romantic. It probably meant exactly what Martin said. We spent so much time together that my name naturally appeared in conversations. Still, as ridiculous as it was, that tiny piece of information became enough to keep hope alive for one more day. And I hated myself a little for how desperately I wanted it to mean more. Tuesday brought rain. Not a heavy storm, just the steady kind that turned the windows gray and made the entire house feel quieter than usual. Martin looked outside while drinking his coffee. There goes my plan. You had a plan? I was going to wash my car. You've changed. I know. I'm actually worried. You should be. By the time we left for work, the rain had become heavier. I'll drive, Martin said, twirling his keys. I thought you trusted me. I do. Then? I don't trust everyone else. Fair. Traffic crawled through the city. Martin tapped absent-mindedly against the steering wheel while another playlist played quietly through the speakers. After a few minutes he glanced toward me. You've been quiet since yesterday. I have? You have. I was just thinking. Dangerous. I know. He smiled briefly before looking back at the road. Everything okay? The question sounded so genuine that lying felt almost unfair. Yeah. You sure? Work's been busy. He nodded slowly. I figured. The truth wasn't completely false. Work had been busy. It just wasn't the reason my mind refused to settle. Ever since meeting Claire, I couldn't stop replaying what she'd said. You talk about him constantly. It shouldn't have mattered. Friends talked about friends. That was normal. Still, a tiny irrational part of me kept asking questions it had no business asking. How often? What exactly did Martin say? Did he smile the way he smiled when talking to me? Or was I simply reading far too much into ordinary friendship? By lunchtime I was annoyed with myself. Hoping for hidden meaning was exhausting. Especially when common sense already knew the answer. After work the rain still hadn't stopped. Instead of heading home immediately, Martin turned into the parking lot of a bookstore. You need something? No. Then why are we here? I don't. He parked. But you do. I frowned. What? He looked strangely pleased with himself. Come on. Inside, the store smelled like paper and coffee. My favorite kind of place. You planned this. Maybe. You absolutely planned this. He shrugged. I remembered. Remembered what? He led me toward one of the shelves. A display stood near the entrance covered with bright signs. New releases. Martin reached for one hardcover novel before handing it to me. I stared. It was the sequel to a fantasy book I'd spent months talking about. I completely forgot this came out. I didn't. I looked up. You remembered the release date? You mentioned it a few weeks ago. A few weeks? Something like that. I shook my head. Martin. What? Normal people don't remember things like this. I thought you'd like it. I do. He smiled, looking oddly satisfied. Good. Without another word, he picked up the book and walked toward the register. What are you doing? Buying it. No. It's fine. It isn't. It's your payment. For what? The garage. I was joking. I wasn't. I caught up with him before he reached the counter. I'm buying my own book. You can try. I'm serious. So am I. We argued quietly for nearly 2 minutes until the cashier started smiling at us. You two always like this? She asked. Martin answered immediately. Pretty much. She laughed. You sound like an old married couple. Both of us froze. For less than a second. Then Martin laughed. I've heard that before. So have I added. The cashier smiled knowingly while scanning the book. Well, She handed Martin the receipt. You're lucky to have someone who remembers things like this. I watched Martin shrug as though it wasn't unusual. It wasn't hard. Maybe not for him. For me. It felt impossible not to notice every thoughtful thing he did. On the drive home, I turned the book over in my hands. You really didn't have to buy this. I know. So why did you? He kept his eyes on the road. You've done plenty for me. I don't keep score. Neither do I. Silence settled between us. Finally, he spoke again. I like making people happy. I've noticed. No. He smiled faintly. I especially like making you happy. The words slipped out so naturally that I wasn't sure he realized he'd said them. My heartbeat stumbled. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did. Neither of us said anything for the next minute. The windshield wipers swept steadily across the glass. Back and forth. Back and forth. Eventually Martin cleared his throat. So, you hungry? I blinked, forcing myself back to reality. Yeah. We still have enough food for another week. I think your mom cooked for an army. She definitely did. That evening we stayed home. The rain continued tapping softly against the windows while we ate dinner in the living room. Halfway through a movie, the power flickered once. Then again. Martin looked toward the ceiling. Don't. The lights went out. The television disappeared into darkness. Only the sound of rain remained. A second later, Martin laughed. Perfect timing. I knew you shouldn't have mocked the weather. It heard me. The emergency flashlight was apparently somewhere in the garage. Neither of us wanted to search for it in complete darkness. Instead, Martin disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying 3 candles. You have candles? My mom has candles. Of course she does. Within a minute, the living room glowed with soft, golden light. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder. Everything else became strangely peaceful. Martin leaned back on the couch. This is actually kind of nice. It is. We should lose electricity more often. I don't think that's how it works. He laughed quietly. For a while we simply sat there talking. Not about anything important. Childhood memories. Embarrassing school stories. Dream vacations. The conversation drifted wherever it wanted. Eventually Martin rested his head against the back of the couch and looked at the ceiling. Can I ask you something? Sure. You've never really talked about relationships. My stomach tightened. What about them? I don't know. He shrugged. I realized I don't actually know what your type is. I forced myself to smile. I have one? I assume. I've never really thought about it. That's a lie. It might be. He looked at me with quiet curiosity. So what? What kind of person do you fall for? The question sounded innocent. It wasn't. Not for me. Because the truthful answer was sitting less than 3 feet away, illuminated by candlelight, completely unaware. I looked down at the coffee table before answering. I guess. I like people who are kind. Martin nodded thoughtfully. Reasonable. People who remember small things. His smile grew. That's specific. People who make everyone around them feel comfortable. He laughed softly. They sound exhausting. Maybe. And? I swallowed. They make me feel safe. Martin didn't say anything for a moment. When I finally looked up, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not confused. Not amused. Just thoughtful. Then he smiled. I hope you find someone like that. The words were kind. Sincere. Exactly what any best friend would say. Even so, for the first time since arriving at his parents' house, I wasn't entirely sure whether the ache in my chest came from hope or heartbreak. The power came back sometime after midnight. Neither of us noticed immediately. We were still sitting in the living room, talking about everything except the one conversation that had quietly settled between us. The lamps suddenly flickered to life. Martin blinked. Well? I guess the universe got tired of listening to us. I was just getting used to the candles. You only liked them because they made the room look expensive. They absolutely did. I laughed. By the time we finally headed upstairs, it was nearly 1 in the morning. Sleep well, Martin said from his bedroom door. You too. I watched him disappear into his room before stepping into mine. Then I quietly closed the door. The conversation replayed in my head while I changed into a t-shirt. People who remember small things. People who make me feel safe. Had I been too obvious? Probably not. Martin hadn't reacted like someone putting pieces together. He'd reacted exactly like a friend listening to another friend describe an ideal partner. That should have reassured me. Instead, I found myself wondering how many pieces of me he had never noticed. The next morning was bright and surprisingly warm. The rain had completely disappeared. Martin looked dramatically happier. Son, you sound emotional. I am. I thought you'd never recover. It was a difficult 24 hours. We both had the day off. After breakfast, Martin wandered into the backyard carrying 2 mugs of coffee. I followed him. His parents had a wooden swing tucked beneath an enormous oak tree. It overlooked the entire garden. Flowers lined one side of the fence. Vegetables grew in neat rows on the other. My mom spends hours out here, Martin said. I believe it. It's her favorite place. I can see why. The morning air still carried the coolness left behind by the rain. For a while, we simply sat there. Birds moved between branches overhead. Somewhere nearby, a lawn mower started humming. The neighborhood felt peaceful. Martin suddenly stood. Come on. Where? I want to show you something. He led me toward the back of the yard where an old wooden shed stood beneath several tall trees. Inside were bicycles, fishing equipment, garden tools, and hanging from one wall, 2 dusty tennis rackets. Oh no. Oh yes. I haven't played in years. Perfect. So have I. You're lying. I absolutely am. 20 minutes later we were standing on the small public tennis court a few streets away. Martin tossed me a ball. Ready? No. Excellent. The first serve hit the fence. The second missed the court entirely. Martin burst out laughing. I thought you said you'd played before. I didn't say I'd played well. Oh, this is going to be fun. An hour later we had completely abandoned keeping score. Neither of us was particularly good anymore. Half the game consisted of chasing balls into nearby bushes. Martin nearly tripped over the net trying to return one impossible shot. I saw that. You saw nothing. I definitely saw something. If anyone asks, I'll tell them. You are a terrible friend. I know. He laughed so hard he had to lean on his racket. Seeing him like that, completely relaxed, hair sticking to his forehead, breathing hard from laughing instead of from playing, it made something inside me feel painfully warm. I wanted to freeze moments like that. Keep them somewhere. Because they always disappeared too quickly. Afterward we stopped at a small cafe for cold drinks. Martin collapsed into a chair. I'm retiring. From tennis? From physical activity. You've had a long career. It was exhausting. The waitress brought our drinks. Martin thanked her with the same easy smile he gave everyone. Once she walked away, he looked back at me. What? You've been staring. I have not. You absolutely have. I was thinking. Dangerous again. You say that every time. Because it's always true. I smiled into my drink. I was wondering something. Go ahead. Why are you always so nice? He frowned. What kind of question is that? I mean it. You thank everyone. You remember everyone's names. You notice when people are having a bad day. He looked genuinely puzzled. Isn't that normal? No. It should be. He leaned back in his chair. I don't know. My parents were always like that. My mom remembers everyone's birthday. My dad still sends Christmas cards to people he worked with 15 years ago. He shrugged. I guess I just grew up thinking people should know they're appreciated. I looked down at the table. There it was again. Another completely ordinary explanation for why Martin was the way he was. He wasn't treating me differently. He treated everyone with kindness. That was simply who he was. It should have made moving on easier. Instead, it somehow made loving him even harder. When we got back to the house that afternoon, Martin disappeared upstairs. A few minutes later he called my name. Louis? Yeah? Can you come here for a second? I walked into the upstairs hallway. His bedroom door was open. He was standing in front of an old closet with several cardboard boxes stacked on the floor. My mom texted. Oh. She wants me to find some travel documents. There, wherever these are. He pointed helplessly toward the boxes. You've officially inherited the family organization project. I regret everything. For the next half hour we searched through old paperwork. Most of it had nothing to do with passports. Instead we found birthday cards, school certificates, letters, old notebooks. Martin held up one of them. I haven't seen this in forever. It was a faded journal from high school. You kept journals? For like 6 months. I was dramatic. Were? Still am. He flipped through a few pages before suddenly laughing. Oh, this is embarrassing. What? I made lists. Lists? Goals. I raised an eyebrow. Can I see? No. Why not? Because 17-year-old Martin was unbelievably optimistic. I'm becoming curious. He sighed theatrically before handing it over. Fine. The first page contained exactly what he'd described. Learn guitar. Travel abroad. Get better at cooking. Run a marathon. Meet people worth keeping forever. I smiled. You never learned guitar. No. You definitely didn't become a chef. Absolutely not. But, I looked back at the page. You actually did meet people worth keeping. Martin grew unusually quiet. His eyes followed mine to the sentence. Then he looked at me. I guess I did. Either of us spoke for several seconds. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Finally he smiled. I've been pretty lucky. I forced myself to smile back. So have I. The words came out more honestly than I intended. Because despite everything, despite the feelings I couldn't say out loud, despite knowing this probably wouldn't end the way I secretly wanted, I couldn't deny one simple truth. Meeting Martin had been the best accident of my adult life. I just wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that friendship alone was enough. By Thursday evening, it no longer felt like I was staying at Martin's parents' house. It felt like I lived there. That realization hit me while I was setting the table without thinking. I already knew where the plates were. Which drawer held the forks? Which cabinet contained the glasses? Martin walked into the kitchen carrying 2 bowls of pasta and stopped. You didn't even ask where anything was. I just noticed. You've officially adapted. I think your house adopted me. I'll let my parents know. They might start charging rent. They absolutely would. We ate dinner with the windows open. The summer air drifted through the kitchen, carrying the smell of freshly cut grass from somewhere nearby. It felt peaceful. Dangerously peaceful. The more comfortable everything became, the harder it was to remember this wasn't real life. It was temporary. Only temporary. After dinner, Martin grabbed his keys. Come on. Where are we going? You'll see. I don't like mysterious answers. I know. That's why you keep giving them. He grinned. Exactly. 10 minutes later we were parked near a small lake just outside town. Families were packing up after spending the afternoon there. Children chased each other along the shoreline. Couples walked slowly around the water. A few people sat on benches watching the sunset. Martin stretched as we got out of the car. My dad used to bring me here all the time. It's nice. It gets even better. We followed a narrow walking path that circled the lake. The sun hung low enough to paint the water orange. Neither of us hurried. We never really did. Walking beside Martin had always been easy. Sometimes we'd spend an hour talking. Sometimes we'd barely speak. Both versions felt equally comfortable. "This place hasn't changed much," he said. "When was the last time you came?" "Maybe 2 years." "Why'd you stop?" He shrugged. "Life." I nodded. Life had a habit of quietly stealing little traditions. One busy week became a month. A month became years. "You know," I said, "we should come back sometime." He looked over. "You'd actually want to?" "Sure. It doesn't have to be because your parents are away." A smile slowly appeared on his face. "I'd like that." We kept walking until we reached a wooden dock stretching a short distance over the lake. Martin sat first. I joined him. For several minutes we watched the water ripple beneath us. Then he asked quietly, "Can I ask you something else?" I laughed. "You've been asking a lot of questions lately." "I know. You can still ask." He rested his elbows on his knees. "Do you ever think about moving? Out of the city? Anywhere?" I considered it. "Sometimes. I've looked at jobs in other places." His words surprised me. "You have?" "Not seriously. But I don't know." He sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm supposed to stay here forever." "You don't sound convinced." "I'm not." He skipped a small stone across the surface of the lake. "I like my job. I like living close to my parents. I like my friends." He looked at me. "But I also don't want to wake up 10 years from now realizing I never tried anything new." I understood that feeling. Probably more than he knew. "I think everyone worries about that." "You?" "Sometimes." "What scares you?" The answer came to me immediately. "Losing you." Instead, I smiled. "Waking up one day and realizing I let important people drift away." Martin looked down at the water. "I've thought about that too." Silence settled again. A breeze moved across the lake, disturbing the reflection of the sunset. Finally, Martin spoke. "I don't think that'll happen with us." "You don't?" He shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because—" He smiled to himself. "I think we're both too stubborn." I laughed. "That's probably true. And—" He hesitated. "I don't know. I've just never questioned that you'd still be around." Something tightened painfully inside my chest. He said it with such certainty. Such simple confidence. As though my place in his life had already been decided years ago. The only problem was, he had no idea I wanted a different place entirely. The walk back to the car was quieter. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. When we reached the house, Martin unlocked the front door and frowned. "Huh? What?" "The porch light. It usually turns on automatically." He looked toward the bulb. "It must have burned out. I'll grab another one." He disappeared into the garage while I waited outside. A minute later he returned carrying a small stepladder and a replacement bulb. "I've got it." "You sure?" "I've changed a light bulb before. I believe in you." "You shouldn't." He climbed the ladder anyway. Halfway up he stopped. "I forgot something." "What?" "I need someone to hold this." I grabbed the ladder. "Happy?" "Very." He carefully unscrewed the old bulb. "I always think these are going to be hot." "You're very brave." "I know." A moment later the new bulb clicked into place. "There." He climbed down. The light immediately switched on, flooding the porch with warm yellow light. Martin looked surprisingly proud. "I fixed something. I'm witnessing history. I'd appreciate less sarcasm." "I'll think about it." He rolled his eyes. As he folded the ladder, he glanced toward me. "You know." "What?" "I'm really going to miss this." I frowned. "Miss what?" He gestured vaguely between us. "This. The last week. Hanging out every day. It feels like college again." My smile faded a little. "I know. We should do it more often. I'd like that. He leaned the ladder against the wall. I don't know why we waited until my parents left town. We're adults. We're always busy. We're terrible at making plans. He nodded. That's true. Then, after a brief pause, he added quietly, I forgot how much I enjoy just existing with you. The sentence hit me harder than anything he'd said all week. Not because it sounded romantic. It didn't. It sounded honest. Simple. The kind of thing someone said when they completely trusted another person. Martin smiled without realizing what he'd done to my heartbeat. Anyway, I'm making popcorn. You choosing the movie? I managed a nod. Sure. He disappeared inside. I stayed on the porch for another few seconds, staring at the warm light above the front door. I knew exactly what was happening. Every thoughtful word. Every quiet evening. Every ordinary moment. They weren't making me fall deeper in love with Martin. That had happened long ago. What they were doing was making it harder and harder to imagine surviving the day this ended. Because for the first time in over a year, I wasn't just dreaming about what life beside him might look like. I was living a version of it. And I was beginning to fear that returning to my empty apartment would feel far lonelier than it ever had before. Friday arrived much faster than I wanted. It was strange how quickly 2 weeks could disappear when every day felt effortless. I woke before my alarm for the first time all week. The house was still quiet. For a few minutes I simply lay there staring at the ceiling, realizing that tomorrow I'd be packing my bags. Martin's parents would be home the following afternoon. Everything would go back to normal. The thought left an uncomfortable weight in my chest. I found Martin already sitting on the back porch with 2 mugs of coffee. He looked up as I stepped outside. I was wondering when you'd wake up. You've become suspiciously cheerful in the mornings. I've always been cheerful. No. You've just never noticed before. I definitely would have noticed. He laughed and slid one of the mugs toward me. Sleep okay? Yeah. You? He nodded. Best sleep I've had in weeks. Really? I don't know why. I did. The house hadn't felt empty. Neither of us had been alone. I kept that thought to myself. Instead, we watched the neighborhood slowly wake up. A dog barked somewhere nearby. Someone started a lawn mower. A delivery truck rolled down the street. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary morning. I found myself wishing it would last forever. Around noon, Martin looked at his phone. My mom. Everything okay? Yeah. He smiled while reading. They're flying back tomorrow morning. There it was. The countdown had officially started. When do they get here? Probably around 3. I nodded. So you'll head home after that? Yeah. Neither of us said anything else. For the first time all week, silence felt heavy. Martin was the one who finally broke it. We're wasting the day. We are? Come on. Where now? I've got one last place. You've been planning all of this, haven't you? I might have. You had an itinerary. I had ideas. You definitely had an itinerary. He refused to admit it. Half an hour later we parked outside a small hill overlooking the town. There wasn't much there. Just a grassy slope. A few benches. A panoramic view stretching across rooftops and distant fields. This was our spot in high school, Martin explained. You came here often? When life felt complicated. I smiled. And did it help? Sometimes. We climbed to the highest bench. The breeze was stronger up there, carrying the scent of pine trees from the woods behind us. The town looked smaller from a distance. Problems usually did. Martin rested his arms across the back of the bench. I used to think I'd leave this place. And now? I don't know. He looked out across the rooftops. I guess I learned that home isn't really about the town. What is it about? The people. His answer came without hesitation. My parents. My friends. You. My heartbeat stumbled. He didn't even look at me. He simply kept watching the view. You've been part of home for a long time. The words settled between us. Simple. Honest. Completely unaware of the effect they had on me. I looked toward the horizon before speaking. I could say the same thing. He smiled. I know. For nearly 10 minutes we didn't say another word. It wasn't awkward. Some conversations didn't need extra sentences. Eventually Martin laughed quietly. Remember freshman orientation? Oh no. What? You introduced yourself by saying you wanted to become financially stable before 30. I had goals. You sounded like somebody's accountant. You told everyone your hidden talent was making grilled cheese. It is. You were very serious. I still am. He shook his head. I honestly thought we'd never become friends. Really? You barely spoke. I was nervous. I thought you hated everyone. I mostly hated public speaking. I wish I'd known that. I wish I'd known you were incapable of taking anything seriously. I take plenty of things seriously. Name one. He looked toward me. You. The smile disappeared from my face. Martin seemed not to notice. Or maybe he simply didn't realize how loaded that answer sounded. I mean it. He shrugged. You've always mattered. I swallowed carefully. So have you. His expression softened. I know. The breeze carried another long silence between us. Then Martin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Can I admit something? Sure. I was nervous before you came. Why? I wasn't sure if spending 2 weeks together would be too much. I blinked. What do you mean? He laughed quietly. I thought we'd get tired of each other. I guess we didn't. No. He smiled to himself. If anything. He stopped. What? I think I forgot how much I missed this. This? Having you around all the time. He looked at me for the first time in several minutes. It felt easy. I couldn't answer immediately. Because he was right. It had felt easy. Dangerously easy. Easy enough that my heart had started pretending impossible things might one day become possible. Martin stood. We should head back. You hungry? Always. On the drive home we sang badly to old songs from college. Neither of us knew all the lyrics. Either of us cared. For a little while, everything felt exactly the way it always had. Until we pulled into the driveway. A black suitcase sat beside the front door. I frowned. That's not yours. Martin's smile disappeared. No. He checked his phone. Oh. What? My dad. He turned the screen toward me. Flight got moved earlier. We'll be home tonight instead of tomorrow afternoon. See you around 7. I looked from the message back to the suitcase. So, they're coming home today. Martin nodded slowly. Several hours earlier than expected. Which meant our 2 weeks together had just become 1 day shorter. Neither of us moved for a moment. Then Martin quietly picked up the suitcase. I guess. He forced a small smile. We should start getting the house ready. For some reason, those simple words felt heavier than anything either of us had said all week. Because suddenly, the ending wasn't tomorrow anymore. It had already started. The rest of the afternoon passed too quickly. Martin vacuumed the living room. I wiped down the kitchen. We folded blankets, watered the plants, and made sure everything looked exactly the way his parents had left it. It felt strangely symbolic. Like we were quietly putting our borrowed little life back where we had found it. Neither of us mentioned it. Around 6:30, Martin looked at the clock. They'll be here soon. Yeah. You should probably pack. I know. I went upstairs and zipped my bag shut in less than 10 minutes. There wasn't much to pack. Some clothes. A toothbrush. The novel Martin had bought me. I picked it up and smiled. A simple gift. Something I'd probably keep for years. When I carried my bag downstairs, Martin was standing by the front window. They just texted. Everything okay? They're 20 minutes away. He looked at my bag. So. Neither of us seemed to know what came next. I guess this is where I say thanks, he said. You've already thanked me about 50 times. I know. I'm aiming for 60. I laughed quietly. You don't have to. I do. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. I've been thinking about these last 2 weeks. Me too. I forgot how much fun everyday life could be. I smiled. We mostly cleaned things. We also played terrible tennis. I was much better than you. Absolutely not. You hit the fence 4 times. You counted? I count everything. I've noticed. The smile faded from his face. Seriously, though. I'm glad you came. So am I. He looked down for a second before meeting my eyes again. You know your family to me, right? The words landed softly. Not dramatically. Just honestly. You don't have to wonder if you're welcome here. You never have to wait for my parents to leave again. If you want to stay over. If you want to come for dinner. If you just need somewhere to be. He shrugged. You've always got a place here. I smiled, even though my chest felt painfully tight. Thanks. I mean it. I know. And I did. That was the hardest part. Martin meant every word. Just not in the way my heart desperately wished he did. The sound of tires crunching against the driveway interrupted us. They're home, Martin said. His parents walked through the front door a moment later, sunburned, smiling, and carrying far more luggage than seemed physically possible. His mother hugged Martin first. Then she turned to me. Louis! She wrapped me in a warm hug before I could even say hello. I hope he didn't drive you completely insane. I survived. Barely, Martin muttered. His father laughed. I see the house is still standing. I told you, Martin said proudly. I can be responsible. His mother looked around the spotless kitchen, then toward the organized garage through the open side door. She narrowed her eyes. You definitely had help. Martin pointed at me. Him. I knew it. She smiled warmly. Thank you for staying with him. It was my pleasure. And surprisingly, it was true. Even if it had complicated my heart more than I wanted to admit. After another 20 minutes of stories about delayed flights and Italian food, I picked up my overnight bag. I should get going. Martin walked me outside. The evening air felt cooler than it had all week. Neither of us hurried toward my car. Back to real life, he said. Looks that way. He shoved his hands into his pockets. This isn't goodbye. I know. We're getting coffee Monday. I'll hold you to that. And don't disappear this weekend. I won't. He smiled. Good. For a moment, we simply stood there. So, I said. So. He stepped forward and wrapped me in a hug. It wasn't unusual. We'd hugged plenty of times before. But this one lasted just a little longer. Long enough for me to realize I was going to miss something as simple as hearing him make coffee in the mornings. He stepped back first. Drive safe. I will. As I climbed into my car, he stayed in the driveway, waving once before heading back inside. The front door closed. The porch light remained on. I drove away slowly. The farther I got from the house, the quieter everything became. When I reached my apartment, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Silence. No humming from the kitchen. No terrible jokes from the next room. No coffee already brewing. Just my own footsteps echoing through the apartment. I set my bag down beside the couch. The novel Martin had given me slid out onto the cushion. Inside the front cover, something caught my eye. A folded receipt. I pulled it out. On the back, in Martin's messy handwriting, was a single sentence. For the guy who always recommends the best stories. Thanks for making these 2 weeks feel like home. Martin. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because it was a confession. It wasn't. Not because it changed anything. It didn't. Martin was still my best friend. and I was still hopelessly in love with him. But for the first time in months, I realized something important. I'd spent so long fearing the day our friendship would end that I'd forgotten to appreciate the fact that it existed at all. Love doesn't always become the relationship you dream about. Sometimes it remains friendship. Sometimes it stays unfinished. Sometimes the happiest memories come from ordinary mornings, shared coffee, terrible tennis, grocery shopping, and conversations that last long after midnight. Would I have chosen a different ending if I could? Of course. I would have chosen one where Martin looked at me the way I looked at him. But life rarely follows the version we write in our heads. As I placed the note back inside the book, I made myself one quiet promise. I wouldn't let loving him stop me from being grateful for him. Because whatever happened next, whatever our future looked like, those 2 weeks had given me something I knew I'd carry for the rest of my life. A reminder that sometimes the people who make a place feel like home are the home you've been searching for all along.